Polish.
Thank you.
We have a tradition at this festival. We give the golden thumb. From Roger, and I know this means a lot to you, I will let you say, because Roger spent so many times talking about your movie, and there's actually another movie in our little booklet that we kept. Roger was going to invite Twin Falls, Idaho, so I hope you come to Ebertfest again with that movie as well.
I'm very, very honored. You know, Roger had a significant impact in my career, and he did this once, he did this once, he did this once. And you know, when it's all said and done, you get this. And there's a lot of stories I have of Roger, and I'll share them with anybody asks the questions, but I'm very, very honored. He was a tremendous soul and a person that I'd run into periodically, and it was always the same thing. Just keep filming, keep shooting it. And that's what he did for us.
And you can either take it with you or we can ship it for you.
Oh, yeah.
We can ship it.
That on a plane might be a little rough.
Yeah, we'll ship it for you.
Yeah, just don't say, like Fonzie, sit on it.
And we'd like to invite Matt Zolerseis to the stage to conduct the Q&A with you. Matt is one of our editors at RogerEbert.com and is also at Vulture and other things. Anyway, RogerEbert.com is the important one here.
That's the one to remember here.
Yes. Thank you, Matt.
Yes. Okay.
Oh, we have one. Okay.
Right center. Here we go. It's proper.
So before we get into this, I just want to share a little story about the first time I met this man and his brother. I was in Los Angeles covering the fall TV preview. I'm also a TV critic. And a friend of a friend was Olivia Nagel.
Yeah, Olivia Nagel.
That's her name.
Yeah.
Worked on Twin Falls, Idaho, which is the first film they did with his brother. And she was a friend of a friend and said, Matt, you have to come out to the set. I'm working on this movie called Twin Falls, Idaho. You have to see it. It's going to be amazing. These guys are amazing. Like, what's it about? It's about conjoined twins who are brothers, and they live together. And I was like, all right. And I went out, and I said, I haven't seen the film. I don't know if I want to do this. She said, just trust me on this. And I went out there, and these guys were in a harness. They'd made this harness.
It was a double corset, like
Right.
a Victorian double corset. We had to pin each other, and there was steel that kept us from pulling apart better than most marriages, you know. Just kept steel there, and they take your knee and they tie it in the back, and it's just it was archaic.
At one point, I said, okay, I'm going to interview them. And because they were sitting, at one point, they had just come out, the first time I spoke to them, they had just come out shooting a scene, and they were wearing the suit. And I thought, this is the damnedest thing I've ever seen in my life. And they were just very calm. I guess you couldn't get out of it easily.
No, we couldn't argue. I mean, I lost a considerable amount of weight, and a new form of yoga, Siamese.
So there's a lot of anti-Minnesota and Wisconsin
Right.
humor in this film. I wondered
Okay.
if you could talk a little bit about the importance of Montana.
Montana was where my father's father, they all homesteaded up there, and it was a very important place that we still reside up, me and my wife still reside up in Montana. But that particular slide to Minnesota was when I was on my first press tour for Twin Falls, Idaho. It was a big deal to get on the bandwagon and go meet everybody in different cities. So Twin Falls was going to open approximately 500 to 1,000 theaters, and you'd go meet people at press. You'd go to the press junket in town. So when we flew into Minneapolis, we were sitting there, and one of the critics says, well, I'm going to take you and your brother out to dinner. I said, great, maybe this will be great. So we sat down, we had a big dinner, and it was really nice. He talked about the film. We go, God, this is going to be great. We get up in the morning, and we open, and his review was, this is the worst movie I have ever seen. And I'm going, he just had dinner with me, brother. Like, so that was kind of like, let's just give that state away. As,
Are there, this story, tell me about the story. Things like this have happened in the
Yes.
country. Was there something like this in Montana?
we still could, there's a river, the Northfork, it comes out of Glacier Park, there's a South Fork and a Middle Fork, and the Northfork is what I used to grow up on. But compared to that and the Hungry Horse Dam, my grandfather helped build the Hungry Horse Dam, which was up by the park, and they said, there's some of these dams, they have towns underneath them, and we could go see them. And so I based it on my grandfather and my dad taking me to these towns in Montana. And when you get up to the High Line, which is right past Browning and the Indian Reservation, it's that desolate. It's very, very rough. And every time I go up there, I go, we could be in Mongolia, we could be anywhere that has this, the wind blows so hard that the grass grows about an inch. I mean, it just doesn't do much movement up there. And I said, let's make a movie up there. The problem is when you tell people you're going to make a movie where Heaven's Gate was, you're not going to make that movie. Yeah.
Did you grow up with lore about the land, about, I
Yeah.
mean, because it seemed there's a very strong sense of place in this movie, and it's a very particular sense of place. It's not like a movie sense of place.
Yeah.
It just seemed like something that you had
Well-
been living with for a while.
Well, it was the first screenplay I ever wrote with Mark. So it was let your imagination just run.
How old were you?
Early 20s probably, I did some short films before that, and I was doing a lot of my own cinematography and shooting. And I said, I'm going to just write what you know. And the evacuation committee is based on all my twins and uncle cousins. And so Matt and Marvin were two people, and Walter and Willis were my twin uncles. And they never, and I was telling Kate when she looked at me, she goes, they just say their name. I said, well, you're in Montana, nobody says hi. They just say, Matt. I go, Mike, Walter, right? They don't say, hey, Matt, how's it going? They're like, Matt. And you're either going to be guilty, or they're happy to see you. Yeah.
Is this I almost hesitate to ask a question like this, but in the case of this movie, I don't know how I can get around it. How did this idea come to you? Because it has the texture of a dream, the feeling of a dream, and things don't, you're sort of explaining things, and yet the explanations are meaningless, and then
Yeah.
there's these mysteries, and
Yeah. It's having an Anglo-white cowboy dad and a Mexican-born and raised Mexican mother who raised me in magical realism. Anything can happen. So that's a real blend of what Donald Trump doesn't want to happen.
Well, that was another thing I was going to ask you about was what sort of religious tradition did you grow up in? But I guess you partially answered that.
Yeah. Well, my mom was very into going to the Catholic Church, which I thought was fascinating. And then it was nice to have some sort of grounding. But I also grew up with a bunch of Mormons that grew up, and the Amish were around. So the suit and the properness was the Amish. And my dad was living in South America at the time. And there was these Mennonites and Hutterites that were living. And the Mennonites were very, very proper. And having to try to put that all in one were the evacuation committee.
And the use of the word departed
Yeah.
is a very deliberate word.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a it's a heavy word, and I tried to use it a lot. And I always thought, let me help you with your transition. And then we thought, departed would probably just be a little bit better.
Were you guys going through any particular thing in your life when you wrote this that made you eager to? When I was 22, 23 years old, I didn't necessarily want to spend a lot of time contemplating death.
No.
Like what?
Yeah, I don't know if we meant that.
Well, I thought of because Roger said that in his
Yeah.
the idea that the flood waters are rising
Yeah.
for all of us.
And watching films like Sergio Leone's film, like Once Upon a Time in America, where a lot of things happened underwater, or when water came as a baptism, started to look at religious symbolism as where can we put this in the American landscape? And some of those things are advertently and inadvertently. It was a painterly America we didn't see before, and doing there's one shot of the American flag which we stitched black and white, which wasn't red, and so, a lot of people said you cannot make a black and white film at this day and age. I said, well, we'll shoot it in color, but everything will be black and white in it. So there's ways of getting around it. It's not impossible.
Did you? How are you able to make this movie on what I assume is a modest scale?
You know,
It looks huge.
it was my father who was up there. I hired a production designer to go up and help me start scouting places, and the winds were about 70 miles an hour, and this production designer, who will go unnamed, said, we'll put it in scaffolding, and the boat will sit on scaffolding. I said, I went home to my dad, and he goes, Dad, we're going to put this huge arc about 90 feet on the plans. We're going to put it in scaffolding. He goes, son, that's going to blow over in the morning. And I said, will you build it for me? He goes, yeah, what do you need? And I got a napkin, no doubt. I said, I want it this big. I want a house on the top of it, and I want sticks. He goes, all right, when do you need it by? I go, 3 weeks. He goes, okay, do you need anything else? I said, I need a house, I need a church, I need an orphanage. And he goes, all in 3 weeks? I said, yeah. He goes, all right. And he took off in his truck, and I came up there. That's what he did.
How did you get this cast?
Once I finished, I knew Daryl Hannah for very, very many years, and I knew Haskell Wexler too through them. So it was a nice combination. She always said she knew about the idea. She goes, "When am I going to play that he/she? When are you doing that he/she movie?" And I said, "Well, now it's so far as a transgender role, so it's perfect. You know, it's one of those things where she encouraged it, and I didn't know how to get funding for this movie, so I just wrote it. And what was crazy is she had this office in her house in Santa Monica, and she had every script that she's ever read, and one of them was Blade Runner. It was one of the original versions of Blade Runner, and I didn't know how to really write a script or format a script, and things were still not on a word processor. They were typewriter based. So I read one night Blade Runner, and then I watched the movie right after it. I go, that really translates in a way that I've never seen, where the interview with Leon, and he starts to laugh. He goes, "What do you mean?" It's written there. Like everything was written and it translated. I go, that's what I need to do, is translate what I see the same way and put it on screen. And that is probably my Blade Runner in terms of how I wrote to put it. I mean, everything was direct. Right.
Did you? How did Nick Nolte come to the end? He's so important because
Yeah.
his voice is the voice of the movie, literally.
Right. I was doing a movie in France called The Good Thief, and he was starring in it, and I was doing a role with him and my brother as it was a remake of Bob the Vampire, and he was going to heist a casino, and he needed two twins. One worked in the casino, one lived on the out. He was going to do a swap. I was flying to Seattle, and he goes, "Why are you going to Seattle?" I said, "Well, my second movie's Jackpot is there, and I should go over and represent." So Mark stayed in the movie, and I flew to Seattle, and we won Best American Film of that festival, or Best something. And I called Mark, and I said, "Hey," he goes, "I'm with Nick, and we're in a bar." And I said, "Yeah, we just won Jackpot." And Nick goes, "So what are you doing next?" And I go, "Tell him Northfork." He says, "All right, Northfork, when I land, I'll meet you about Northfork." So I went to his house and said, "You're going to be in our next movie." He goes, "All right, just tell me how to get there." But what was difficult, that he was doing the Hulk. At the time, he was doing the Incredible Hulk, and he had the beard and the hair, and the studio said, "Do not touch his hair. Do not touch his beard, and you can have him for 3 days or 4 days." I said, "Great. How are you going to get him up here?" I said, he can't take a commercial flight because we're way in the middle of nowhere. I said, "Do they have private jets?" They go, "Yeah." "Who has the American Express?" "All right, put it on a private jet." And like maxed out one card just to get Nick Nolte up there.
So he was only out there for 4 days.
Yeah, he was there flew for 5 days altogether, like 1 week. Yeah.
The scene where the scene with the house, the bisected house, that was also a practical set.
Right. Yeah, we built the houses because of the way they move houses in Montana in general is that if the house is too big, they'll cut it in half and they'll move it in sections. If the house is small, they'll do it. You'll see sometimes going down the road on an 18-wheeler, half of a house and the other half of the house behind it. You know.
I've never seen that.
Come visit. Come to the other side, Matt. Come to the other side.
Visit Montana. The voice of the Montana Tourism Commission, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit. You said you wanted to share some more stories about Roger.
Yeah, well, my favorite Roger Ebert story, and I'll take as long as I can because he deserves every minute of my time. I just wrapped Twin Falls, Idaho, and Sony Classics, we went to Sundance and Sony Classics bought it, and they were sending it out for critics to review it. And then this time we were still doing film prints, and Roger was doing at the movies. And this is somebody I just loved since I was growing up because it was on, I think it was a public station that had after movies with Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert. And ever since I was growing up, I went, one day maybe they'll review a movie and this would be a really special time. They go, well, Roger's ordered your prints and he's going to watch it in his theater. I said, oh, this is great. So I'm in Los Angeles. I am remodeling a house because in between making movies, you do what anybody else does is sink more money into something you don't know what you're doing about. And so I'm remodeling a house. I get a phone call from the publicist of Sony saying, Roger's watching your movie this afternoon. I think it was a Sunday. I said, great. My dad goes, get in the car. We're going to go to Home Depot, get some wood. I'm like, I just can't. I just can't go get wood right now. He goes, why? I said, because Roger Ebert's watching my movie. He goes, so? He says, come down and we have to get some lumber and throw it in the back of your truck. I said, okay. So I'm walking down the aisles of Home Depot, and he goes, what's wrong with you? I said, Roger Ebert's watching my movie. And he goes, what? I said, he's like the biggest critic, and if he slams my movie, it's my first movie, and it's over. I mean, my career's already over, hasn't even started. So I get home, and the phone rings, and it's one of Roger's either secretary or works with him, and they call and they said, Roger wants to know, are you identical twins? And I said, yeah, I'm an identical twin. And I hang up to him and he goes, shit, he doesn't think I look like my brother? I'm fucked. I'm like, now he's calling to say, how do I slam these guys because they don't look and they're in a big t-shirt and they're waddling down a hallway. Like this is going to be, so I'm going, my dad said, get down and get the lumber. I said, Dad, he doesn't think I look like my brother. He goes, what do you mean? I go, Roger doesn't think I look like Mark. And he goes, what? In my movie, I said, we're together. And he goes, okay. And then an hour passed, and I'm sitting underneath my house, and we're sweating pipes, which is in plumbing terms, we're actually soldering copper together. And I hear above me, which is who's ever younger than us, the fax machine going off. And it's going zzz, and papers are dropping. I can hear them underneath my house. And I don't know, I go up there, and it says, Roger Ebert, I think one of the best films of the year. And he wrote the most beautiful glowing review, and I went, oh my God. All right, I'll be down, right back down. I'm going to be right there, just sweat the pipes. To him, it doesn't mean anything. So don't worry too much. That was my favorite Roger story.
I was talking to you backstage before we came out here, and I hadn't seen this movie. I saw it 3 times when it came out, and I was kind of evangelical about this movie. And I hadn't seen it since it came out, and it's a different movie. Right. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like
really
you, and I think you said something to that effect.
Yeah.
Also.
Yeah, I was watching it, and I leaned over to my wife, and I said, this looks like an old movie. When it's film, it was shot on film, it was processed on film, and it was distributed on film. And you can watch the reel changes with the pops on each side. On the right corner, which we don't have anymore, is that you could see the reel. The bladders would change, and each reel would come up, and you'd see one dot, and then you see the second dot. And I was romanticized going, we used to time out reels based on timing, meaning a 12-minute reel, 10-minute reel, or some reels would be short. And I looked, and I started to look at the image and go, this is a movie, if I didn't make, I would think it came from a reel beyond another time. And that's what film has. I think that quality of film is really present in that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Let's take a few questions from the audience. I think they're gonna.
Oh, right,
They got it covered.
Question up front.
Okay, I was a bit confused on like part of it. Was most of that either like a dream sequence or really happening when that one person was leaving the orphanage and leaving it on that plane towards the end of the film?
Or Irwin's world was very dream feverish, and he needed a lot of people to help him get to the other side. You know, if you can, all his stuff, all his book, all his mementos on the side were actually, there was a cup of tea, so he imagined this would be a cup of tea. And he imagined the plane that he wanted to leave on was the plane he played with, and everything he imagined in a sort of a Alice in Wonderland feel was right next to his bed, and he never left. He just, you went through with him.
Anybody else?
First row in the balcony, just a bit to your left.
Yeah. This movie was spectacular, really unlike anything I've seen. But,
That's what Roger said.
well, it was. It was. I mean, but it had qualities of a lot of different films, and it talks about that in reviews. But I haven't heard anyone say exactly that it's talking about, or it's an imagination of what it's like to help be crossed over and to let go of this physical world. I want you to tell me if I'm completely off or
No,
yes.
you know, this film has a lot of interpretations, and one idea that I had when we were writing this with Mark was, what's it like to help somebody go through a transition, and what are they feeling, and is there something that you can do to help them? And Nick Nolte's mother was passed away, and he was telling me a story that he moved her into his house so she could die in his, you know, in his presence, and he watched her, you know, go over 2 weeks, and he thought she was taking her last breath, and he'd walk to her and say, and she'd wake up and go, "Hey, let's have some soup." And then he'd go down, and she would sleep for 2 days, and he goes, maybe she's passed away. So he really taught me a lot about how to witness and help somebody go through a transition, that you're there, and when it's time for them to go, they'll go, and they're going to use back and forth.
Where do you come up with these strange concepts like the 20 questions in the soup diner, or the wooden angel hands, or the weird horse dog stilt creature? Like, where's this coming from? I mean, it's very...
I'm sober. I'm completely sober. You know, I wish Guillermo was here, because he does weirder shit.
He does. He
You know?
does. He does.
And he eyes and hands, and I'm like folklore compared to him. But, you know, I'm an artist by trade, and I paint a lot, and I draw a lot, and I just feel that if you can think it, you should be able to produce it. And it's, you know, it's very Kubrick feeling in that way, that when you go into a diner and there's no food, you're going to try and guess what it's going to be like to get the food. That's basic. It's real basic. When, you know, when you're hungry and somebody's looking at you and you don't think there's food, you can say chicken, or you can say hamburger. It's roulette when you're starving.
One thing I've learned in interviewing artists for 25, 30 years now is the most mysterious and striking things in the movie are almost always things they can't tell you exactly why they did it.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
And which is why I am now going to ask you about the dog creature on stilts.
Yeah.
And the fact that Nick
Is
Nolte's
the
cane
cane, yeah.
has the dog head on it.
Yeah. That's
Huh?
yeah.
What's up with that?
I know. It's just dogwood.
Damn it.
You know, you think of a cane, you think of a dog, you need some assistance, and watch out what you follow. Right.
Another
Question
question.
center.
Yes, Michael. Very interesting that you meant that comment about the about Kubrick, because I was thinking that there was it was very much like Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey, because there was the transition for Keir Dulley's character. I thought it was very similar. I didn't think about it. I was thinking about it while you were speaking initially, but the other thing that I thought was kind of fascinating is that you're sort of I guess a devotee of Montana, whereas the Coen brothers, obviously are Minnesota. I noticed that you had your kind of your little dig in on Minnesota. Is there anything there between the two of you?
I had to write the Coen brothers a letter, because I said, this is not about you guys. I'm so sorry. I said, Polish brothers are gaining traction. We're not here to take over land grabbing time. I said I was a dig about a critic who took me out to dinner, and I got a nod like both of them, and that's it.
The last thing you want to do is start a Montana-Minnesota feud.
Yeah, no. But I mean, we have a lot more area to hide bodies. You know? Just saying.
I think maybe one more.
Got a question here in the center, toward the back.
Hi. I noticed that the evacuation men had wing lapel pins, and they also had little white feathers in their hat.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering what you were trying to symbolize or subtly communicate through that. And also, it seems like there's a certain level of extortion going on between getting the people out of their homes and them individually profiting from that.
Well, they all work for Pan Am. No, I felt when you're going to have people that evacuate, and there is, when you do have to evacuate people in this day and age, that you have to do a affordable price or a market price to get their house so they can either put up a mall or a parking lot. And I felt that, in terms of power and how to keep society moving, and sometimes when they're, especially in Montana or some other, when there's a development going on, where are they going to get that power, or where are they going to get that power to run that city? And so you sacrifice sometimes the smaller town to get the bigger town. And these guys were obviously working for Lakefront Property, which I realized, God, they didn't get that much for doing so much work, but that's America.
Do we have one more up there? Yeah, okay, sure.
Yeah, one more question from the center of the balcony.
I just wanted to ask real quick. I saw, James Woods had a very primary role in this, but in the credits, he was also an executive producer for the film. I was curious, how did you get James Woods as part of this whole project?
Well, Jimmy actually came to the premiere of Jackpot, my second film. And I didn't know him very well, but he stayed in the lobby and said, "Oh, that was really interesting." And I was such an enormous fan of him and Robert De Niro's portrayal when they did Once Upon a Time in America, that anything I could do to get Jimmy to be in this movie, because he was intense, and you can see some of the images are from Once Upon a Time in America when they put the handkerchiefs over their face and the black coat. It was sort of my homage to Sergio Leone and some of the things he was doing with the widescreen. Jimmy asked if what I was doing next, and I said, I think I'm going to, this is before I talked to Nick about doing this, and he said, I don't fly anywhere. I don't take a plane, but I'll drive. If I can drive there, I'll be in your movie. I said, it's Montana. And he goes, I've never been there. I said, great. How about you come on up? And he said, okay, it's going to take me 3 days to get up there. And he did it without a deal in place, and he came up. It's one of those special times when you're making a movie that people wanted to be a part of it, as opposed to, my contract's not done, I'm not going to show up. And those are the type of guys that did this movie.
Thank you very much, everybody, for coming
Thank
out.
you.